Ladies and gents, hello and welcome back to another video. Today we've got a 2019 5K iMac and we're going to be reviewing this thing and see how it stacks up in 2026. So let's start off with my unit and talk about its specs. We're going to go through some benchmarks, talk about gaming, look at the price point of these here on the used market, and then we're going to decide if this computer is worth it or not. So starting off with the specifications of my unit, this one is certainly not a base configuration. We'll talk about the standard options here in just a moment, but I have a 3.7 gigahertz 6-core i5. That is a Intel 9600K CPU. That's paired with 16 gigabytes of DDR4 memory and the Radeon Pro 580X graphics card with 8 gigabytes of VRAM. We're running macOS Sequoia, the latest version 15.7.7. And I realize it says 255 gigabytes of storage, but this is actually a 1 terabyte solid state drive. I just have it partitioned between macOS and Windows. We'll also talk about that in a few minutes. So those are the specifications of my specific model iMac. Now, the 5K display on this iMac is truly phenomenal. This is a beautiful panel. The colors are good. The resolution is unmatched. The only downside is that it's a 60 hertz screen, so there's no ProMotion, and that is something you're definitely going to notice if you're coming from a newer Mac. On the rear, the port selection of this Mac is actually very nice. We have a headphone jack, SD card reader. We've got 4 USB-A ports, 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports, and an Ethernet port. And then you can see where the power connector jumps in there. Right above that, there is a little door that you can pop open and access the RAM slots. Like I mentioned before, there are 4 slots to upgrade or install additional memory. The design of this iMac is very familiar. It's the exact same on the external as Apple launched it in 2012 when they first introduced the slim iMac models. Overall, a very nice and timeless design. The bezels are a bit big, but I do think this is a really nice looking computer. So I went ahead and I ran Geekbench 6, and I've got the results up on the screen here. Single core for the CPU score came in at just a little over 1500. Multi-core is just a little over 5000. Now, these are really low numbers for 2026. Now, if we look at the graphics score, this is actually still fairly competitive. We got a metal score of 53,579. So let's go ahead and compare that to some Apple Silicon computers and see where this thing stacks up. So in terms of graphics, if we compare these to some more modern Apple computers, let's take a look at the 14-inch MacBook Pro with the M3 chip and the 13-inch MacBook Air with the M4 chip. And you can see that our GPU score here on the 2019 iMac sits right in between the GPU score of both of these computers. So for a device that is 4, 5, almost 6 years older than these computers, that's actually pretty decent. Now, looking at the CPU score, the iMac leaves a lot to be desired. So let's compare the iMac CPU score here with the lowest Apple desktop with Apple Silicon, and that's of course going to be the M1 Mac Mini. You can see that both the single and the multi-core scores of the M1 Mac Mini are way ahead of the 2019 iMac. And keep in mind that this is actually one of the upgraded processors you could get for this iMac. This is the 9600K, that's 6-core i5. Even the i9 configuration cannot keep up with Apple Silicon. So here we are inside of Cinebench, just in case you were curious what that score looks like. 1538 for our Intel i5 9600K inside of our iMac 5K. Okay, let's go ahead and fire up Minecraft and see how this iMac performs on a very CPU and GPU demanding game. So here we are. I loaded up an amplified world and we're going to go ahead and fly around and see how this looks. So right off the bat, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the settings. I got the resolution cut in half and I've got the frame rate maxed at 60 and the render distance is all the way at 32. So let's see how this thing performs. So as we fly through the map here, you can see it is actually a little bit stuttery. Definitely not a smooth 60 frames per second, and there are a few hiccups here and there as we look around. I can't say for sure if that is the GPU or the CPU or perhaps even a slower RAM. The RAM is only DDR4 in this iMac. I believe it's 2666 megahertz, so certainly quite a bit slower than some of the newer DDR5 configurations that are available now. Of course, we are maxing this out with 32 chunks of render distance, so I guess we'll give the computer a little bit of grace here. I've got to wonder if it isn't the CPU, just because I do think the 580X is still a fairly powerful GPU. at 1440p. So let's go ahead and bump down the render distance to, let's go ahead and put it at 24 and see how that stacks up. So that actually looks quite a bit smoother. That should be able to run the frame rates here, especially at, look at how fast the map loaded. That was actually pretty impressive there. And as we fly around and kind of pan the camera from side to side, this is definitely smoother than it was on the 32 chunk max render distance. So without a doubt, Minecraft is certainly playable here on the 2019 5K iMac. So let's look at pricing. This is Apple's website as it stands right now. And if we look at the M4 iMac, which this is what replaced both the 21 and the 27-inch iMac, let's go ahead and spec one out to give it something similar to what we've currently got. So the base configuration only gives us 2 ports. Let's go ahead and bump that up to the 4-port option because we've got to at least get close to the number of ports on this current iMac. I've got 1 terabyte of flash storage, so let's see, we'll do 1 terabyte here on the M4 iMac, and that's going to put us just shy of $2,000, $1,899 for a comparable new iMac from Apple. Okay, let's head over to eBay and see how these things are currently priced on the used market. I'm going to pull up a few different options here in new tabs, and we'll go through them one by one and see how they stack up. All right, we got 4 different listings open up here. So this one looks like it's the high end. It's got the 8-core i9, 32 gigs of RAM, 580X GPU, and 1 terabyte of SSD. So this is a pretty solid configuration. That's going to set you back $500. Moving on to the next one. This one is This one's $295. This looks like a base configuration with 512 gigabytes of SSD. I can't read the specs there on the computer to see if that's accurate or not, but that's actually not a bad price for one of those, especially with a solid state drive. Now this one does not have any good photos, and this one is about $315, so not a whole lot there. The last one here is an interesting listing because you can kind of choose some configurations, but they actually don't have any other configurations in stock. So you're stuck with what they've got, and that one is $325. So it seems like anywhere from $300 to $500, depending on a configuration, will get you a 5K 2019 iMac. All right, here we are inside of Windows. And in case you forgot, Intel Macs actually can run Windows natively. So I have Windows 10 installed, and I went ahead and downloaded Steam, and we're going to run through a couple games here. This is Call of Duty Black Ops 3, and we're going to see how it performs here on our iMac. So let me go ahead and load into a solo zombies game, and we'll check out the performance. Okay, here we are inside of a zombies game here, and this is actually looking pretty good. You can see the FPS counter up in the right corner. We're staying very close to that 60 mark. Of course, that is the max of this display. And I do believe I have the settings set at 1440p. Once this round finishes, we'll go ahead and check that out. So let's go ahead and take a look right now at my settings. So we are at 1440p with the render resolution set at 100, and pretty much all of these settings are maxed out on high or ultra, and we are getting very close to 60 frames per second. So this is very playable. It looks really good here on this display. I mean, I guess you could bump it up to 4K or even 5K, but I really don't think that this computer's GPU is going to be able to push that many pixels. Okay, so moving on from Black Ops 3, let's test a little more demanding title, and that's going to be Battlefield 5. Now, this is a much more CPU demanding game, and it's going to push the GPU a bit harder as well. Let's see if we can find a server to join here, and we'll see how the performance is on our iMac. All right, here we are. We have joined into a Conquest server. I think this is Conquest, and we're going to go ahead and run around. This is actually looking pretty smooth, not quite as nice as Black Ops 3. I can't say for sure if we're hitting that 60 frames per second mark. I think we're somewhere in the 40s perhaps, maybe high 40s, low 50s. Oh, I just got wrecked there by something. I was going to show you guys the graphics settings just so we can confirm. So let's go ahead and do that right now while I lay on the ground and recover from whatever just exploded near me. So 1440p, and I'm going to bump up that field of view just a little bit. Turn off motion blur. I really don't like motion blur on games. The advanced settings are, let's see what we've got here. Kind of a mix between ultra and medium on the quality. A little bit of everything going on there. I think I must have optimized that at some point. But this game is looking pretty good here on our 5K display. Of course, that resolution is cut in half at 1440p. but this is running really nicely. I would definitely consider this playable. However, this is certainly not as nice of an experience as you might get if you're playing this at 4K resolution, or if you've got a high refresh rate monitor like 120 hertz or above. 60 hertz panel here on first person shooter games is just not quite up to par, especially here in 2026. So let's see if I can find some of the action here in this game just to show you guys how this performs. All right, here we go. We're going to try to finish capturing Bravo, and let's see what goes on here. Looks like we've got some company here at the flag, and I was not quite quick enough with the draw there. All right, well, Battlefield 5 is definitely playable here on the 5K iMac. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this quick review here. Looking at this computer, I think it's a great design. Getting one of these for around $300 I do think is still a fair value here in 2026. Beautiful display, fantastic speakers. That's something I didn't really talk about before. The specs of this really aren't up to par here for 2026, but if you're just using this for daily tasks like managing photo libraries, email, Safari, I mean, you can even do some moderate gaming on this device if you install the right applications or even dual boot into Windows. I think this is a fantastic computer for the right price. So there you guys have it. Hopefully you enjoyed this review here of the 2019 5K iMac. This computer is certainly showing its age in some of the specs and performance, but the design and the display really set this computer apart in terms of some of the available options here in 2026, especially at that $300, $400, $500 price point. All right, that's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I look forward to seeing you in another one of my videos.